We live in succession, in division, in parts, in particles. Meantime, within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one. And this deep power in which we exist and whose beatitude is all accessible to us is not only self-sufficing and perfect in every hour, but the act of seeing and the thing seen, the seer and the spectacle, the subject and the object are one. We see the world piece by piece as the sun, the moon, the animal, the tree, but the whole of which these are shining parts is the soul. Ralph Waldo Emerson. So what is consciousness? Consciousness is perhaps one of the most complex and mysterious phenomena studied by humans. At its core, consciousness is the state of being aware of and able to think about one's surroundings, self, and experiences. It is the ability to feel emotions, make decisions, and reflect on one's existence. To make it simpler, think of consciousness as your inner voice, the part of you that knows you're alive, allows you to think, dream, and recognize the world around you. Scientists often explain consciousness by dividing it into three main aspects. The first aspect is self-awareness, which is the knowledge that you exist as an individual. For example, when you see yourself in a mirror and recognize your reflection, or when you have the thought, "I am me," you are demonstrating self-awareness. The second aspect is perception, which is how you experience the world through your senses, such as seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. Consciousness helps you interpret these sensory inputs, creating your unique experience of reality. And last but not the least, there is cognition, which involves thinking, reasoning, and decision-making. Cognition allows you to learn, remember, solve problems, and plan for the future. These three aspects together form a comprehensive understanding of consciousness. Despite all our advances in neuroscience, no one fully understands how consciousness arises from the physical brain. Philosophers famously called it the mind-body problem. How can a non-physical sense of self emerge from the physical structures of the brain? This question forms the foundation of debates about whether consciousness can exist independently of the body. For as long as humans have been conscious, we have pondered what happens after we die. This fascination is deeply rooted in culture, religion, and mythology. Ancient civilizations had varied beliefs about life, death, and the afterlife. For example, in ancient Egypt, people believed that the soul continued to exist after death. Life was seen as a temporary stage, while death was viewed as the journey to the afterlife. Elaborate rituals like mummification were used to preserve the body so the soul could recognize it and live forever. Tombs like the pyramids were filled with objects the deceased might need in the next world. The Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, guided the soul through the trials of the afterlife to ensure eternal peace. In ancient Greece, people believed in an underworld ruled by Hades, where the souls of the dead resided. Philosophers like Plato argued that the soul was immortal and pre-existed the body. He described death as the release of the soul from the prison of the physical body. Mystery religions, such as the Eleusinian Mysteries, promised to initiate followers into secret knowledge about the afterlife. In the Indian Vedic traditions, Hinduism ties consciousness to the eternal soul. The eternal soul is reincarnated in a cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, influenced by one's karma. Liberation occurs when the soul realizes its unity with the universal consciousness, ending the cycle of rebirth. Similarly, in Buddhism, there is no permanent self, but consciousness carries forward in a process called rebirth until one achieves enlightenment. Other cultures, such as many Native American and Aboriginal traditions, view the soul as part of a larger web of life, with death seen as a transformation into a different state. In Chinese traditions, Taoism and Confucianism emphasize harmony between life and death, often viewing the afterlife as a continuation of ancestral connections. These ancient traditions show that people from different cultures all share a common wish to understand death and what happens after we die. They highlight the universal human desire to make sense of mortality. Across time and geography, people have created rituals, stories, and philosophies to address the question, does something of us live on after death? The big question is, why do humans ponder immortality? At its heart, the question of immortality isn't just about the afterlife. It's about understanding what it means to be alive. Humans have the unique ability to think about the future, reflect on the past, and confront their own mortality. Several factors drive this fascination. Emotional reasons include the idea of eternal life, which brings comfort when facing the loss of loved ones. The hope that they continue to exist somewhere provides solace. Fear of death, often called existential dread, motivates us to seek answers. Wondering what happens after we die can be both terrifying and inspiring. Spiritual reasons include the teachings of many religions and spiritual traditions, which suggest that life has a purpose beyond the physical. Belief in an afterlife reinforces the idea that our actions and choices matter. The search for immortality often ties into humanity's quest for connection with a higher power or universal truth. Existential reasons involve humans craving for meaning. Asking whether consciousness survives death forces us to consider deeper questions like, why are we here? And what is the purpose of existence? Immortality represents the ultimate mystery and challenges our understanding of time, space, and what it means to exist. This question isn't just abstract, it shapes how we live. It influences our decisions, morals, and relationships. Whether we believe in an afterlife or not, the idea of immortality shapes our cultures and values. To explore whether consciousness lives forever, it's important to consider different perspectives. Philosophical inquiry forms the foundation for understanding consciousness and immortality. It helps us ask questions about reality, identity, and the soul. Thinkers like Plato, Descartes, and modern philosophers like David Chalmers offer ways to discuss whether consciousness is tied to the body or exists on its own. Scientific exploration involves neuroscience, which looks at how consciousness arises from brain activity. It also investigates things like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and altered states of consciousness. Physics provides theoretical ideas such as whether consciousness is connected to energy or quantum processes. Case studies and some real evidence include research on near-death experiences like Sam Parnia's AWARE project, which gives first-hand accounts of consciousness beyond clinical death. Researchers like Ian Stevenson have documented cases of children recalling past lives, sparking debate about reincarnation. Digital consciousness projects, like mind uploading, explore the potential for preserving human minds beyond the biological body. By combining these perspectives, we gain a deeper understanding of whether consciousness may live forever. By combining science, philosophy, and evidence, this video will provide a complete look at the question, does consciousness live forever? It will mix logical thinking with our natural curiosity, creating a fascinating story that embraces the wonder and mystery of existence. Understanding consciousness has been a central question in philosophy for thousands of years. Philosophers across cultures have pondered its nature, origin, and destiny. Is consciousness tied to the body, or does it exist independently? Does it die when the body dies, or does it live on? These questions have inspired a rich array of ideas and debates. Let's explore the perspectives of ancient philosophers, Eastern traditions, and the interplay between rationalism and spiritualism. Plato, a Greek philosopher from the 4th century BCE, is one of the earliest thinkers to articulate a detailed view of the soul and consciousness. According to Plato, the soul is eternal and pre-exists the body. Plato believed that the soul existed before birth and entered the body as part of a larger cosmic cycle. He saw the body as a temporary vessel for the soul, which would leave the body upon death and continue its journey. Plato argued that all knowledge is recollection. In his famous dialogue Phaedo, he suggested that the soul has lived many lives and carries memories from those previous existences. Plato theorized that the soul comes from a higher, eternal realm called the world of forms. This is a non-physical realm of perfect ideas and truths, which the soul longs to return to after death. In short, Plato viewed consciousness as eternal, transcending physical existence. His ideas inspired later philosophical and religious concepts about the immortality of the soul. Aristotle, who was Plato's student, had a different view on the soul. He also believed in the soul, but he based his ideas on the physical world. Aristotle saw the soul as the essence or blueprint of a living being, meaning it was not separate from the body. He compared it to the design of a tool, like how the sharpness of a knife is inseparable from the knife itself. Aristotle categorized the soul into 3 parts. The vegetative soul, found in plants, is responsible for growth and reproduction. The sensitive soul, found in animals, is responsible for perception and movement. The rational soul, which is unique to humans, is responsible for reasoning and self-awareness. Aristotle believed that the soul could not exist without the body, so when the body dies, consciousness ceases to exist. Aristotle's materialist view stood in stark contrast to Plato's metaphysical perspective, setting the stage for centuries of debate about whether consciousness is purely physical or something more. In Hindu philosophy, consciousness is seen as a reflection of the eternal self, known as Atman. The Atman is considered the true essence of an individual, distinct from the body and mind. It is eternal, unchanging, and connected to the universal consciousness, or Brahman. According to Hindu beliefs, life and death are part of a continuous cycle called samsara. In this cycle, the soul is reincarnated into different forms based on karma, which is the consequence of one's actions. The ultimate goal in Hinduism is to achieve moksha, which is the liberation from the cycle of rebirth and the realization of unity with Brahman. In contrast to Hinduism, Buddhism denies the existence of a permanent self or soul, a concept known as anatta. In Buddhism, consciousness is viewed as a dynamic, ever-changing process, similar to a flame passing from one candle to another. While rebirth occurs, it is not the same self being reborn. Instead, it is a continuation of consciousness influenced by karma. The ultimate goal in Buddhism is to achieve enlightenment, or nirvana, which represents the cessation of suffering and the end of this cycle of rebirth. Taoism, an ancient Chinese philosophy, views life and death as part of a natural, eternal cycle. Taoists see consciousness as part of the Tao, the universal flow of energy that permeates everything. Death is not an end but a transformation, like water changing form. These philosophies provide a spiritual framework for understanding consciousness as part of a larger cosmic cycle, transcending individual lives. The question of consciousness has sparked debates between two opposing views, rationalism and spiritualism. René Descartes, a 17th century philosopher, argued that consciousness is distinct from the body. This view, called dualism, suggests that the mind is non-physical and can exist independently of the body. Descartes' famous quote, "I think, therefore I am," emphasized the primacy of thought and self-awareness as proof of existence. On the other hand, spiritual traditions often reject rationalism in favor of mystical experiences. Mystics describe consciousness as a divine spark within every individual. Some called the soul a guest in the body, while others wrote about transcending the physical self to experience ultimate unity with the divine. These perspectives highlight the tension between scientific reasoning and spiritual intuition in understanding consciousness. One of the most intriguing contributions to the study of consciousness and immortality comes from Ian Stevenson, a psychiatrist known for his scientific approach to reincarnation. Stevenson documented over 2,500 cases of children who claimed to remember past lives. He used rigorous methods including interviews, cross-checking details, and verifying claims with historical records. Many children provided specific details about deceased individuals they could not have known. Some even had birthmarks or scars corresponding to injuries from the prior life they described. A boy in India who recalled being murdered in a nearby village. His descriptions matched a real murder case. A girl in Sri Lanka who identified her former family and home with precise accuracy. While critics argue that these cases could be explained by coincidence or suggestion, Stevenson's work has intrigued both scientists and spiritual thinkers, keeping the reincarnation debate alive. Philosophical perspectives on consciousness are as diverse as they are profound. From Plato's belief in an eternal soul to Aristotle's materialist view, from Hinduism's cycle of rebirth to Descartes' dualism, each theory reflects humanity's quest to understand what it means to be alive and aware. Modern research, such as Stevenson's studies, bridges ancient ideas with contemporary inquiry, adding depth to the timeless question, does consciousness live forever? This rich tapestry of ideas reminds us that the nature of consciousness is not just a philosophical puzzle, but a deeply personal and universal mystery. While philosophy offered frameworks for exploring consciousness for millennia, the scientific exploration of the brain began only in recent centuries. In the 19th century, the study of consciousness began shifting from a purely philosophical debate to a subject of empirical science. Key discoveries about the brain and nervous system laid the groundwork for modern neuroscience. In the 1800s, scientists began associating specific brain regions with functions. This marked the beginning of the idea that consciousness might arise from physical processes in the brain. While now debunked, phrenology, the idea that different brain areas controlled traits like personality and thought, sparked interest in the relationship between the brain and behavior. French physician Paul Broca identified a region of the brain, now called Broca's area, linked to speech production. His research showed that damage to this area caused specific deficits, suggesting that certain mental functions were localized in specific brain regions. This discovery was monumental because it demonstrated for the first time that consciousness, in this case language and thought, was not spread evenly across the brain, but was tied to specific structures. Helmholtz measured the speed of neural impulses, revealing that thoughts and reactions were not instantaneous but involved physical processes in the brain. His work hinted at consciousness as a product of neural activity, rather than an ethereal or immaterial phenomenon. Often called the father of modern psychology, William James wrote extensively about consciousness as a stream of thoughts, feelings, and perceptions. While James valued introspection and philosophical inquiry, he also recognized the need for scientific methods to study consciousness empirically. These early efforts set the stage for the 20th century revolution in neuroscience, where technological advancements enabled scientists to directly study the brain's role in consciousness. In the 20th and 21st centuries, advances in technology transformed our understanding of consciousness. Tools like electroencephalography, functional magnetic resonance imaging, and positron emission tomography allowed scientists to visualize brain activity and correlate it with conscious experience. Neural correlates of consciousness refer to the specific brain activity that happens when you're aware of something. Think of it as identifying which neurons light up when you become conscious of something. When you see a red apple, visual processing occurs in the occipital lobe at the back of the brain, but your conscious perception of red involves a complex network of brain regions. Key brain structures involved in consciousness are the cerebral cortex, thalamus, and reticular activating system called RAS. The cerebral cortex, the brain's outer layer, handles functions like thinking, memory, and perception. The thalamus, known as the brain's relay station, processes sensory input and is essential for awareness. The RAS, located in the brainstem, controls wakefulness and alertness. Damage to the RAS can lead to comas or loss of consciousness. These structures are important for maintaining and regulating our conscious experiences. Different states of consciousness, such as wakefulness, sleep, and dreaming, are linked to specific patterns of brain waves. For instance, beta waves are connected to active thinking and focus. When you are relaxed and calm, alpha waves are more prominent. During deep sleep, delta waves are seen. These brainwave patterns help scientists understand how our brain functions in different states of consciousness. Modern neuroscience emphasizes that consciousness is not localized in a single brain region, but arises from dynamic interactions across multiple areas. This interconnectedness makes it a complex and elusive phenomenon. Does consciousness end with the brain? Despite these advances, the fundamental nature of consciousness remains a mystery. Two critical questions dominate this field. Does consciousness arise solely from the brain? Most neuroscientists believe that consciousness comes from brain activity. There is evidence supporting this idea. For example, changes in brain chemistry due to drugs, injury, or disease can change our state of consciousness. Additionally, brain injuries can cause significant changes in personality, memory, and awareness, indicating that consciousness is closely connected to the brain. These findings suggest that our conscious experience is deeply rooted in brain activity. Can consciousness exist without the brain? This question is highly debated. While mainstream science often supports the idea that consciousness comes from brain activity, some phenomena challenge this view. For example, during near-death experiences, some patients report vivid, conscious experiences, even when their brains show no measurable activity. Out-of-body experiences similar to NDEs involve a sense of awareness outside the physical body. Some researchers, like Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, propose quantum theories suggesting that consciousness might be a quantum process, potentially existing independently of the brain. These intriguing ideas keep the debate on consciousness ongoing. Scientific studies of patients in altered states of consciousness have provided fascinating insights. Brain death is defined as the irreversible cessation of all brain activity. In 2018, researchers from Yale revived brain cells in pig brains hours after death, suggesting that some cellular activity persists even after clinical death. While this wasn't consciousness, it raised questions about how death is defined. Patients in comas or vegetative states often display minimal or no outward signs of awareness. However, advanced brain imaging has shown surprising results. One British neuroscientist detects signs of awareness in vegetative patients. When asked to imagine playing tennis, some patients showed brain activity similar to that of healthy individuals, suggesting they were conscious but unable to communicate. The study by Dr. Sam Parnia investigated consciousness during cardiac arrest. Some patients reported detailed experiences of their surroundings, despite their brains showing no activity during that time. The scientific exploration of consciousness has come a long way, from 19th century theories about brain localization to modern studies on neural correlates and altered states. However, key questions remain unanswered. Is consciousness purely a product of the brain, or could it exist independently? Studies on brain-dead patients, minimal consciousness states, and near-death experiences suggest there is still much to learn. As science continues to advance, the mystery of consciousness serves as a reminder of how little we truly understand about the nature of existence. The nature of consciousness is one of the deepest mysteries in both science and philosophy. While traditional neuroscience ties consciousness to brain activity, theoretical physics explores whether it might be connected to the fundamental laws of the universe. Concepts like quantum mechanics, string theory, and the multiverse have opened new possibilities for understanding consciousness. However, these ideas are controversial and often met with skepticism. One of the most intriguing and controversial ideas is that consciousness might be a quantum phenomenon. This theory, known as the orchestrated objective reduction, simply called the Orch-Orr model, was developed by physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff. At the smallest scales, particles behave in strange and unpredictable ways. They can exist in multiple states at once, which is called superposition, or influence each other instantly over vast distances known as entanglement. Penrose and Hameroff proposed that these quantum effects are key to consciousness. The theory focuses on tiny structures in brain cells called microtubules. These are part of the cell's skeleton, but Penrose and Hameroff suggest they also process information at the quantum level. According to this, consciousness arises when quantum superpositions in microtubules collapse into a definite state. This collapse is influenced by gravity and the fabric of space-time itself, linking consciousness to the fundamental structure of the universe. Hameroff points out that anesthetics, which block consciousness, act on microtubules. This suggests microtubules play a role in awareness. The instantaneous nature of quantum entanglement mirrors the interconnectedness some people report in spiritual experiences or altered states of consciousness. String theory, a leading framework in theoretical physics, suggests that the universe operates in more dimensions than the three we experience. It proposes that the fundamental building blocks of reality are not particles but tiny vibrating strings. Could consciousness transcend dimensions? According to string theory, there may be 10 or 11 dimensions, most of which are hidden from us. Some physicists, like Michio Kaku, speculate that consciousness might interact with these higher dimensions. String theory also supports the idea of a multiverse, an infinite number of parallel universes. Could consciousness exist in multiple dimensions or universes simultaneously? Kaku describes consciousness as a process of understanding and navigating the complexity of the universe. He speculates that advanced civilizations might develop the ability to transcend physical dimensions, creating a form of cosmic consciousness. If consciousness is connected to higher dimensions or the multiverse, this could explain phenomena like near-death experiences or a sense of oneness with the universe reported in mystical states. These experiences might involve glimpses into other layers of reality. Quantum entanglement is one of the most mysterious phenomena in physics. When two particles become entangled, their states remain connected no matter how far apart they are. A change in one particle instantly affects the other. Entanglement relates to consciousness by suggesting a deep connection between all living beings. This concept proposes that human consciousness might be linked, explaining shared thoughts, intuition, or collective experiences. Experiments have looked into whether entanglement applies to living organisms. For instance, scientists observed quantum coherence in photosynthesis, hinting that quantum effects might influence life processes. If similar coherence exists in the brain, it could support the idea of consciousness being based on quantum processes. This could explain why people sometimes feel connected to loved ones over long distances, or why humans experience unity during meditation or near-death experiences. The idea that consciousness arises from quantum mechanics faces several criticisms. Critics argue that the brain, a complex system with trillions of neurons, operates at a macroscopic level, making it unlikely for tiny quantum effects to influence consciousness. Quantum mechanics typically applies to atoms and subatomic particles, which are much simpler than the brain. Furthermore, there is a lack of strong evidence supporting the idea that quantum processes in the brain produce consciousness. For example, the Orch-Orr theory, which suggests quantum effects in microtubules might create consciousness, hasn't been proven experimentally. Many neuroscientists believe traditional explanations based on classical physics already account for consciousness and dismiss the need for quantum theories. Additionally, some critics see the quantum consciousness link as more philosophical than scientific and caution against using quantum mechanics without solid proof. Finally, traditional neuroscience offers explanations for many aspects of consciousness, like decision-making and memory, without needing quantum mechanics. The mystery of what happens when we die has fascinated humanity for millennia. Among the most compelling pieces of evidence for the possibility of consciousness existing beyond death are near-death experiences, or NDE. These have been shared by people who have come close to death or were declared clinically dead but then revived. Though these experiences vary slightly, they share strikingly similar patterns. Scientists and researchers have studied NDEs extensively, seeking to understand whether they are purely biological phenomena or evidence of something more profound. So what are near-death experiences? Near-death experiences occur in individuals who are close to dying or have been temporarily declared dead. These experiences are vivid, often life-changing, and reported by people from all walks of life, regardless of their cultural or religious background. While each near-death experience is unique, many people report common elements. One frequent experience is an out-of-body sensation, where individuals feel they have left their physical body and can see events from above. They might describe observing medical staff working on them, or seeing their own body on an operating table. Another common feature is the perception of moving through a tunnel or corridor toward a very bright but comforting light. Some people mention meeting deceased loved ones who often appear healthy and happy, offering reassurance or guidance. Others report having a panoramic life review, where they relive significant moments in vivid detail. Many individuals also mention feelings of overwhelming peace, love, and detachment from earthly worries. Finally, some report encountering a barrier they cannot cross, after which they are sent back to their body. These recurring features raise questions about whether NDEs are universal human experiences and whether they point to something beyond biological processes. Scientists have tried to explain near-death experiences using physiological and neurological theories. While these ideas explain some parts of NDEs, they don't cover everything. For example, when the brain lacks oxygen, a condition called hypoxia, it can cause hallucinations, tunnel vision, and feelings of euphoria, which are similar to NDEs. However, NDEs sometimes happen when the brain isn't working at all, like during cardiac arrest, so it's unclear how these experiences occur. During extreme trauma or stress, the brain releases chemicals like endorphins, which can create feelings of peace or detachment, but this doesn't explain the clear and detailed experiences reported during NDEs. The temporal lobe, a part of the brain related to perception and memory, can be stimulated to produce sensations like those in NDEs. But these artificial stimulations don't usually include complex stories and awareness of real events. Critics believe NDEs are the brain's way of handling extreme stress and the fear of death. However, the consistent reports of NDEs from people of different cultural and religious backgrounds suggest that these experiences might not be entirely subjective or influenced by culture. Some near-death experiences are so detailed and verifiable that they are central to studying this phenomenon. One well-documented case is Pam Reynolds' experience. In 1991, she underwent a rare surgery to remove a brain aneurysm. Doctors induced clinical death by stopping her heart, draining her brain's blood, and lowering her body temperature. During the surgery, Pam reported leaving her body and observing the medical team. She described specific details about the instruments used, the surgeon's conversations, and the procedure itself. Details she couldn't have known under normal conditions. Medical personnel confirmed her brain was inactive during this time, raising profound questions about how consciousness could persist when the brain is effectively off. Other verified cases include patients who see events occurring in distant rooms or describe specific objects they couldn't have seen during surgery. Children report NDEs and describe meeting deceased relatives they had never known or heard about. These cases challenge purely physiological explanations and suggest that NDEs may involve phenomena not yet understood by science. Dr. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician and researcher, has conducted thorough studies on near-death experiences. His study focused on patients who had cardiac arrests and their experiences during clinical death. In this study, over 2,000 cardiac arrest patients were observed across multiple hospitals. To test if patients could have out-of-body experiences, researchers placed images and objects in operating rooms where they could only be seen from above. The study found that a small percentage of patients had vivid experiences during cardiac arrest, including detailed memories of medical procedures and feelings of peace or detachment. One patient even described events in the room accurately, despite their brain showing no activity. The AWARE study suggests that consciousness might continue even when the brain is inactive, but skeptics note that such cases are rare and not fully understood. Near-death experiences remain one of the most intriguing mysteries of human consciousness. While scientific explanations like oxygen deprivation and neurochemical responses provide partial answers, they fail to account for the vivid clarity, verified details, and transformative nature of many NDE. Eastern spiritual traditions have long explored the depths of consciousness, often reaching insights that modern science is just beginning to examine. Practices like meditation, yoga, and shamanic rituals delve into altered states of awareness, offering profound experiences of expanded consciousness, timelessness, and self-transcendence. These practices often blur the line between spiritual mysticism and scientific exploration. Meditation, an integral part of many Eastern spiritual practices, is one of the most studied methods for altering consciousness. By training the mind to focus or transcend its usual patterns, meditation can profoundly shift perceptions of time, space, and self. Meditation is a significant practice in Eastern traditions like Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism. In Hinduism, meditation is one of the 8 limbs of yoga described in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It aims to calm the mind and connect with the universal consciousness known as Brahman. In Buddhism, techniques like Vipassana, called insight meditation, and Samatha, which means calm abiding, help practitioners observe their minds and transcend their ego. Taoist meditation focuses on aligning with the natural flow of energy and often involves breath control and visualization. Advanced meditators sometimes report a loss of individuality and experience unity with the universe, known as pure awareness. Meditation can change the sense of time, making it feel infinite or suspended. Studies have shown that long-term meditation enhances brain function, increasing activity in the prefrontal cortex, linked to focus, and decreasing activity in the default mode network, linked to mind-wandering and ego. Scientific research has found that meditation changes brain activity. Techniques like fMRI and EEG show that meditation can boost alpha and gamma brainwaves, associated with relaxation and heightened awareness. A 2011 study by Richard Davidson found that long-term Tibetan Buddhist meditators had increased brain activity in areas linked to empathy, compassion, and self-awareness. The Bardo Thodol, often translated as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is a sacred text in Tibetan Buddhism that provides instructions on navigating consciousness after death. This text is not just a spiritual guide, but also a detailed exploration of the mind and its states. So what is the Bardo? Bardo refers to the intermediate state between death and rebirth. Tibetan Buddhism teaches that consciousness continues to exist after physical death, passing through various stages before reincarnation. The Bardo Thodol offers guidance for navigating these stages, helping the consciousness achieve liberation or a favorable rebirth. The stages of Bardo described in the Bardo Thodol, also known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, explain what happens after death. The first stage, Chikai Bardo, is the moment of death when the individual's consciousness encounters the clear light of reality. If this light is recognized as the individual's true nature, they can achieve liberation. The second stage, Chonyid Bardo, involves visions and hallucinations often shaped by the individual's karma. The final stage, Sidpa Bardo, is the process leading to rebirth, where consciousness looks for a new body. Modern interpretations of the Bardo Thodol draw parallels to near-death experiences. Psychologists like Carl Jung have suggested that the vivid imagery in the Bardo Thodol represents deep aspects of the human mind and unconscious experiences. Indigenous cultures have long used psychoactive substances like ayahuasca and DMT, called dimethyltryptamine, to explore altered states of consciousness. These substances have become important in both spiritual practices and scientific research. Ayahuasca is a brew made from plants found in the Amazon rainforest. It contains DMT, a powerful psychoactive compound, and is used in shamanic rituals for spiritual journeys. DMT is often called the spirit molecule because of its ability to produce deep, otherworldly experiences. People using ayahuasca and DMT often report seeing visions of otherworldly beings, geometric patterns, or even deceased loved ones. Many also experience a loss of ego, feeling deeply connected to the universe or a higher power. Users frequently gain emotional insights or feel a release from trauma, which is why ayahuasca is being studied for its potential in therapy. Studies show that DMT interacts with serotonin receptors in the brain, creating intense visual and emotional experiences. Brain imaging of ayahuasca users shows changes in the default mode network, a brain region linked to self-referential thinking. This might explain the ego-dissolving effects of these substances. Indigenous shamans believe that ayahuasca opens a spiritual portal, allowing access to higher planes of existence. While modern science is cautious about these claims, many researchers agree that the experiences produced by DMT are profoundly meaningful to those who undergo them. Eastern spiritual practices like meditation and shamanic rituals often seem mystical. However, modern neuroscience is starting to reveal how they work. Meditation has been shown to change the brain physically, a concept known as brain plasticity. For example, a 2005 study by Sarah Lazar found that experienced meditators had thicker cortical regions in parts of the brain linked to attention and sensory processing. Meditation also reduces cortisol levels, which decreases stress and improves well-being. This supports traditional beliefs that meditation brings inner peace. Studies on psychedelics like DMT and psilocybin suggest these substances can temporarily reset the brain, helping people break free from fixed thought patterns. Psychedelics show promise in treating mental health issues such as depression, PTSD, and addiction, making the line between spiritual practice and medical science less clear. There are criticisms, though. Some skeptics argue that spiritual experiences from meditation or psychedelics are just brain-created illusions with no real significance. Additionally, these practices often involve subjective experiences, which are hard to study scientifically. The concept of digital immortality, transferring human consciousness to a digital medium, sounds like the stuff of science fiction. Yet, advances in neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and computing power are edging this once fantastical idea closer to reality. While the idea holds immense promise, it also raises profound ethical, philosophical, and practical questions. Could we truly upload a mind? If so, would that uploaded consciousness still be us, or merely a copy? Mind uploading refers to the hypothetical process of transferring a person's consciousness, memories, and personality into a digital format. Achieving this would require a deep understanding of the human brain, advanced computational systems, and sophisticated brain-computer interfaces. Mind uploading involves several steps to create a detailed map of the brain. This process, known as connectomics, aims to map all neural connections. The human brain has around 86 billion neurons, each linked to thousands of others, creating a complex network. Scientists use techniques like electron microscopy and advanced imaging to map smaller brains, such as those of fruit flies and mice. To upload a mind, it is also necessary to simulate brain activity. This means replicating the electrical and chemical processes of how neurons fire and communicate. Projects like the Human Brain Project in Europe and IBM's Blue Brain Project are using supercomputers to simulate the brain, though they are still far from creating a fully functional human brain model. Brain-computer interfaces, often called as BCI, are devices that connect the brain to computers. For example, Elon Musk's company Neuralink is working on implants that might allow direct brain-computer interaction in the future. Currently, BCIs help paralyzed patients control robotic limbs or communicate using thought. Another approach to mind uploading is creating a digital clone of a person. This involves training an AI to mimic someone's behavior, speech, and decision-making based on data like social media activity, emails, and recorded conversations. While this does not transfer actual consciousness, it raises questions about what it means to live on digitally. Even if we could upload a mind, the questions about digital immortality are complex and controversial. Consciousness isn't just data, it involves personal experiences, emotions, and a sense of self. If we replicate the brain's structure and function, would the uploaded mind feel like the original person? Some argue that uploading a mind wouldn't transfer your consciousness, but create a copy. For example, copying all the files on your computer gives you the same data, but it's not the original machine. If both a digital version and your biological self exist, which one is the real you? Philosophers have wondered if identity is linked to continuity. If you slowly replace parts of your brain or body, are you still the same person? Uploading might create a version of you, but if your biological self dies, is the digital self truly you? There are ethical questions too. Who would own the uploaded mind? Could it be exploited or controlled by companies? If only the wealthy can afford mind uploading, will it create a new divide between digital immortals and biological humans? And finally, would digital consciousness change the essence of what it means to be human? The 2045 initiative, launched by a Russian entrepreneur in 2011, is one of the most ambitious projects aimed at achieving digital immortality. The vision of the 2045 initiative is to allow humans to transfer their consciousness into non-biological bodies, essentially achieving immortality. The plan is divided into 4 distinct phases, each representing a significant milestone in the integration of human consciousness with advanced technology. The first phase, Avatar A, 2015 to 2020, focuses on developing a robotic body that can be controlled by a human brain using brain-computer interfaces. This phase aims to establish a foundational link between human cognition and robotic mechanics. In the second phase, Avatar B, 2020 to 2025, the objective is to transfer the human brain into a robotic body, thereby allowing individuals to live as cyborgs. This step marks a critical transition towards a more integrated human-machine existence. Moving forward, the third phase, Avatar C, 2030 to 2035, envisions uploading a complete human consciousness to a computer, creating a digital avatar that can exist independently of a biological body. This phase aims to achieve digital immortality. The final phase, Avatar D2045, involves the creation of holographic bodies or other forms of advanced non-material existence for digital consciousness, representing the pinnacle of the plan, where human consciousness transcends physical limitations and exists in a highly advanced and versatile form. Although there has been progress in developing brain-computer interfaces, the goal of mind uploading is still far from being achieved. Critics argue that the roadmap is overly optimistic because of the complexity involved in replicating consciousness. This has generated both interest and controversy. Some supporters see it as a way to overcome death, while critics worry that it might strip away what it means to be human. Many people find the idea of digital immortality conflicting with their spiritual beliefs. In most religions, the soul is considered immaterial and cannot be replicated by technology. Philosophers argue that digital consciousness might lack the personal experiences that define life. Some neuroscientists and philosophers believe that reducing consciousness to neural data is an oversimplification. Consciousness might involve processes we don't yet understand and may not be replicable by machines. Technologically, the human brain is incredibly complex, with trillions of connections forming dynamic patterns. Current computing systems cannot replicate this complexity. Storing and simulating an entire brain's data would need an unprecedented amount of computational power. There are also ethical dilemmas. For example, could digital minds be hacked, manipulated, or controlled? And if immortality becomes achievable for some, would it devalue the lives of those who remain mortal? The first law of thermodynamics, also known as the law of conservation of energy, states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred or transformed. This relates to our brains because they rely on energy to function. Neurons, which are the cells that process and transmit information, use electrical and chemical energy to communicate. This energy comes from the food we eat and the oxygen we breathe. Since energy is key to brain activity, some people think that consciousness might involve energy that doesn't just disappear when we die. When a person dies, the body decomposes, and the chemical energy stored in it is released into the environment as heat, contributing to the surrounding ecosystem. But what about the energy of consciousness? If consciousness is tied to physical processes in the brain, it may dissipate when brain activity stops. However, if consciousness is something more, could it persist in a different form? Many Eastern traditions see consciousness as a type of life energy. For example, in Hinduism and Taoism, concepts like prana, which means vital energy, or suggest that life force continues beyond the body. While these ideas align with the law of conservation, they are more philosophical and lack scientific proof. Most scientists think of consciousness as an emergent property of physical processes in the brain. This means consciousness arises from the interactions of billions of neurons and isn't a separate entity or form of energy. Neurons communicate through electrical impulses and chemical signals, creating patterns that lead to thought, memory, and awareness. These energy exchanges are physical and measurable, following the laws of thermodynamics. Emergence refers to complex phenomena that come from simpler interactions, like how water's behavior emerges from interactions between hydrogen and oxygen atoms. Similarly, consciousness is thought to come from the complex interactions of neurons. When these interactions stop at death, consciousness likely ceases, just as a wave disappears when water becomes still. Some wonder if consciousness might involve energy that could continue in another form. This idea is highly speculative, but rooted in curiosity about the unknown. If consciousness isn't just an emergent property, but involves some non-physical energy, it might follow the laws of thermodynamics and persist after death. Theories like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff's or theory suggest that consciousness could involve quantum processes not limited to the brain. Some compare the brain to a radio receiver, tuning into consciousness like a broadcast signal. When the brain stops working, the consciousness signal might still exist elsewhere. There is no direct evidence to show that consciousness works as a distinct form of energy. Unlike physical energy, consciousness can't be measured in terms of joules or watts, making it hard to fit into the framework of thermodynamics. Even though the idea that consciousness is a form of energy that continues after death is interesting, it remains largely speculative and unproven. First, consciousness is not measurable energy. We can measure brain activity, like electrical, but these are physical energy manifestations, not consciousness itself. Second, consciousness is heavily dependent on the brain. When brain activity stops, so does consciousness. For example, during brain death, there is no evidence of awareness or thought. This shows that consciousness is likely a product of physical processes in the brain, not a separate entity. Third, There is a lack of empirical evidence for ideas like quantum consciousness or non-physical energy. Science relies on evidence that can be observed, measured, and replicated, which these theories have not provided. Fourth, the first law of thermodynamics, which states that energy cannot be created or destroyed, applies to physical energy like heat, light, or motion. It does not necessarily apply to abstract phenomena like consciousness, which may not be energy in a physical sense. Just because the brain uses energy does not mean consciousness itself is energy. Lastly, consciousness could be a very complex process rather than a mysterious force. Seeing it as a physical phenomenon, even if not fully understood, fits better with current scientific models. Panpsychism is a fascinating theory about consciousness. It suggests that consciousness is not just something humans or animals have, but a basic property of the universe present in all matter. This might sound mystical, but it has gained attention in modern philosophy and science. It proposes that all matter, down to the smallest particles, has some degree of consciousness. This doesn't mean that rocks or atoms think like humans, but they might have a very basic form of awareness, often called proto-consciousness. Panpsychism avoids the mind-body problem by suggesting that mind and matter are not separate. Consciousness is as fundamental as mass or charge. It suggests there is no clear line between conscious and non-conscious entities. Instead, there is a continuum, with more complex forms of consciousness emerging in more complex systems, like human brains. Traditional neuroscience and physics struggle to explain how subjective experience arises from purely physical processes. Panpsychism offers an alternative by suggesting that consciousness doesn't emerge, but is already present in the universe at every level. Modern proponents of panpsychism include philosophers like Philip Goff and Galen Strawson. Goff argues that the scientific revolution sidelined consciousness by focusing only on measurable properties of matter. He suggests that a new paradigm is needed, one that integrates consciousness as a fundamental aspect of the universe. Strawson believes that consciousness cannot emerge from non-conscious matter and must already be inherent in all matter. David Chalmers, known for articulating the hard problem of consciousness, and Integrated Information Theory by Giulio Tononi, also explore ideas related to panpsychism. One major challenge for panpsychism is the lack of direct empirical evidence. Consciousness is subjective and difficult to measure. However, theoretical exploration and analogies from physics provide some support. For example, just as electromagnetism is a fundamental force in the universe, panpsychism argue that consciousness could be a fundamental property of matter. Some theorists also draw connections between panpsychism and quantum mechanics. Critics argue that panpsychism lacks evidence and remains a speculative philosophical idea rather than a scientific theory. They also contend that consciousness, as we understand it, is tied to complex systems like the human brain. The combination problem questions how tiny, simple forms of consciousness combine to create the rich experience of human consciousness. Competing theories propose that consciousness can be explained as an emergent property of complex neural activity without invoking panpsychism. Consciousness is one of the greatest mysteries of human existence. Despite centuries of philosophical inquiry and decades of scientific research, our understanding remains incomplete. What is consciousness? Where does it come from? Does it end with the physical body, or could it exist beyond? While science has made remarkable strides in exploring the brain and its functions, there are still many limitations in our ability to fully explain this phenomenon. Modern science has provided incredible tools to study the brain, but consciousness is more than just neurons firing. It involves subjective experience, self-awareness, and emotions, things that are not easily reduced to physical processes. Neuroscientists have identified neural correlates of consciousness, NCC, which are specific patterns of brain activity linked to conscious experiences. For example, the prefrontal cortex and parietal lobe are associated with decision-making and self-awareness, while the thalamus plays a key role in sensory integration and wakefulness. Technologies have allowed researchers to map brain activity in great detail. However, these tools only measure correlations. They don't explain how or why brain activity produces subjective experience. Physics has provided fundamental insights into the nature of matter and energy, but it struggles to integrate consciousness into its framework. Classical physics views the universe as a mechanical system where everything can be measured and predicted. Consciousness, with its subjective qualities, doesn't fit neatly into this model. Quantum mechanics, with its strange phenomena like superposition and entanglement, has inspired speculation about its connection to consciousness. But these ideas remain highly theoretical. Psychology offers valuable insights into behavior, thought patterns, and emotions, but it often relies on subjective self-reports. While it can describe how consciousness manifests, it cannot fully explain its origin. Consciousness is deeply personal and subjective, making it difficult to study using objective scientific methods. This limitation has led to what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness. How can physical processes in the brain give rise to the rich inner world of thoughts and feelings? The dominant view in neuroscience is that consciousness arises from the complex interactions of neurons in the brain. This idea is supported by evidence showing that damage to certain brain regions can alter or eliminate aspects of consciousness, such as memory and self-awareness. Drugs and anesthesia, which affect brain chemistry, can switch consciousness on or off. However, there are intriguing questions about whether consciousness could exist independently of the brain. Some people report vivid conscious experiences during near-death experiences when brain activity is minimal or absent. For example, the study by Dr. Sam Parnia documented cases of patients accurately describing events that occurred while they were clinically dead. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff suggest that consciousness might be linked to quantum processes, which could theoretically exist beyond the brain. Panpsychism is a philosophical view that posits consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, present even in non-living matter. While speculative, it challenges the assumption that consciousness is exclusively biological. Could machines ever become conscious? Current AI systems mimic human thought processes, but they lack subjective awareness. If consciousness arises solely from complexity, it's conceivable that advanced AI could one day become self-aware. However, if consciousness involves something more fundamental, like energy or a soul, then it may remain uniquely human.